reference this, or if some people can't make it.
Yeah.
Cool. So this should be a series of events and webinars that we run to cover the various topics of, I think, Jamf and the Apple ecosystem in general. So I'll just give it a couple of minutes for another couple of people to turn up if there's anyone else.
I'm just getting the drinks and the popcorn ready for the show.
Hopefully it's that entertaining. Need to have like elevator music in the background.
Oh, don't. That'll be the when I grew up music. You know, when you're getting old is when you hear it in supermarkets, and you know you're really old is when you hear it in an elevator.
Okay, so it looks like it is the 6 of us. So I will start with my screen and we will get going. All right.
Okay.
And sharing Edge. Awesome. So for those who don't know, I am James. I'm one of the panel integrators and I service a good 15, 20 schools every 2-3 weeks. I'm one of the Jamf engineers that kind of does the setups and the back ends of all the primary schools I visit. This will be a series of webinars. I believe this one is just going to be a refresher for kind of zero-touch deployment, just general groups and settings in Jamf and how they can be used. And I believe next week we have a Jamf teacher and classroom overview. So, starting with zero-touch deployment, the Apple ecosystem works from devices that the schools actually own being linked to their environment in Apple School Manager. I'm guessing everyone has an Apple School Manager due to this being a refresher course rather than kind of new people entering the system in general. So once you arrive at your Apple School Manager, I'm just going to jump into one of my schools that I, in fact, have some work to do. So that should be a good example.
Sorry to jump in just for a tick, James. It's Paul here from Solutions IT. It's probably worth just confirming everyone does know what Apple School Manager is and what it's for. Just to, before you dive too deeply into it, what it is, I guess just get some idea of who's familiar with it.
Cool. So Apple School Manager is kind of the online identity that binds Apple itself to an institution. So for every Apple School Manager instance, you will actually have an institution ID, which will be the organization ID. The Apple School Manager through that can manage everyone who needs a managed Apple ID, or if you're going to volume purchase applications to push out to iPads. If you have multiple sites, it can distinguish between if you have kind of kindy, high school, primary school divisions. And then you've also got the iPads themselves. The serial numbers will be tied to your institution. So instead of having kind of domestic setup on the iPads, those serial numbers can be pushed to Jamf itself, so that as the iPad turns on, it will basically ask Apple if it's owned by anyone and get tied to that school. And then it pushes through those settings to Jamf. So that setup is the device enrollment program. I believe it's now called the Apple Enrollment or Apple Deployment Program now. Been a slight rebranding over the last couple of years. But essentially, when you purchase iPads from the CUA of Winthrop or JB Hi-Fi, they will actually ask you for your organizational ID, or they should ask you for the organization ID. And through that, under devices, you will see what is actually owned by the school as an institution. And then through that, they can actually be assigned to the school through the DEP program or through here by Apple Configurator. But we won't go into Apple Configurator yet because this is about the zero-touch deployment. So you can see in settings and Zoodesk, which is the old branding for Jamf, we've got all of the default devices that get turned on get pushed through to Zoodesk. So effectively what happens is you turn on a new iPad that's been purchased. It will check in with the activation server. Activation server goes, oh, you're owned by X school. And then it'll look at X school's Apple School Management, and then it'll push that iPad through to be managed by a Jamf. So it's a really nice little automated way to not have to configure anything until it hits Jamf, and Jamf can be set up ahead of time so that you don't have to do any configuration on the day that you turn on all the devices. So the other thing that you'll be doing in Apple School Manager will be apps and books, which is effectively where you get all your volume purchasing. And it is easy as searching for app that your school would like. And once you click on it, you'll be able to choose your location, which most of you will have one, but I do know that there's some with offsites. And then you can, with free apps, buy far too many, because it's much easier to overbuy free apps than when you purchase another 5 or 6 iPads, then have to go to every single free app and buy another 5 or 6 licenses. So hint, definitely overbuy on the licensing component. So once that goes through purchasing, it will send you an email receipt of those who have admin accounts, and within a couple of minutes should be available in Jamf. That's pretty much what you'll kind of use Apple School Manager in department schools, at least, as a whole. Yeah, no, there shouldn't be anything else there. And this would be Jamf. So Jamf is an MDM, or a mobile device management setup, which effectively enables you to not have to do any onboard configuration on the iPads. You more control all of the devices themselves through groups, and those groups can have profiles and applications actually tagged to them or scoped to them. So I'm just going to hit synchronize, and we'll hopefully pull through those couple of, or that app that we've just purchased. Cool. So to start with Jamf, pretty much everything revolves around the devices and the groups that they're in. So in Jamf, you've got your devices and then device list. And it gives you a great broad overview of what the name of the device is, who owns the devices, when they were last connected, what groups they're a member of, serial number, and the operating system. If you go into an iPad, you'll get effectively the same overview that if you had the device in front of you. So you can check serial number, operating system. If it's supervised, which is a requirement for MDMs to kind of have the authority to tell the iPad what to do. You've got charge level, available space. If you have an asset system, or if you've got information that you want to attach to the device, that's a great place to put it. Quite often the library barcodes is a good thing to do for asset tags. You've got a whole bunch of quick actions that you can use. Most of it's safety and security. So you can wipe devices or shut down, restart them. If you enable lost mode, you will be able to do the sound ping to be able to locate lost iPads if it's in a drawer, or you know it's in the classroom, you're just not sure where. You've also got Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. If someone has set restrictions or a PIN, you can also wipe it from here, which will stop students if they've managed to do that. you can check what profiles and what apps are on the device. So I'll go into this more in a second, but these are all the profiles that we've deployed to this series of groups, which you can kind of get a general overview of what they do. The managed apps is, of course, all of the apps that we have scoped to these groups and have successfully downloaded. And if there's any problems, you can also sort and find out that there are issues. It's a nice way to diagnose if an iPad's not behaving the way it is, what's actually going on, rather than it's a grey icon and I don't know what that means. So from the devices, they are organized into device groups. So there's two types of groups. One is a smart group, which you set up conditions to have the device added to that group. For this school, I've actually set up these smart groups so that if it has ECE in its device name or junior, music, senior, it gets pulled into those groups. So instead of having to manually sort and add iPads to the static groups, it will automatically pick up on what the devices are called and what they should be doing. We do have some static groups, which I can show you as well. And we'll start with that. So we've got say a reward iPads, and you can see that it's just for iPads that it's been added manually. So static groups, you can literally just click add whichever iPad you'd like, and now it's part of the group. Or if you want, you can click the X's over to the right-hand side and dismiss the iPad from the group. So in groups, you can have apps scoped, of which you can click the add button and pick whatever app you would like. Automatic or on demand is a setting you can choose. 90% of the time, automatic will be what you want. On demand can be used for very large apps like GarageBand, which then if the students really require it, they can go to the Jamf student app and then download it on demand rather than having a smaller iPad with very large apps that don't get used. You can also push out PDF documents. I haven't seen this used a lot, but it would be very useful for coding resources or books that get found. It is possible to do ebooks, but it's a lot of work, and a lot of schools can avoid the legwork around those. Otherwise, we have profiles, which there aren't any configured for this group. But again, if you click add, then you have all of the profiles required, of which you just do automatic deployment. So I'll show you the difference between the smart group that I was talking about before. So it works exactly the same as a static group, except in the members tab, you have conditions of device name contains junior in its name. You can add as many conditions as you want, and there's a big selection of how you want to organize the iPads. A good one is if a device is supervised, then add this profile or add it to this group. Quite often, if you're doing Wi-Fi settings, if something's supervised, it's owned by the school, therefore it gets the school Wi-Fi settings, or it might be a wallpaper or lock screen. So it's a good way to add everything and safeguard against you've added 30 iPads 6 months down the track, but you forget to add those 30 iPads to a group. Those kind of smart groups will be that kind of fail-safe. So from the groups, you've got the applications. So you can add apps to groups via this tab, or you can add the app to multiple groups from the apps page itself. So it's kind of a one-to-many and many-to-one. You can do it from either direction. So you can see that ABC Kids Play has this description from the Apple Store, lets you know that it's a free app, gives you how many you own and how many have already been deployed, gives you a set of options to have a bit more control. And here is where you can see how the devices are actually scoped to the app. So it's currently with EC iPads, junior iPads, and the junior block. But if we want to also go to the senior, you can click plus, click senior, and hit save. And then Jamf will automatically push that app to those 33 as well. There is also a hidden button, which is this tiny cog in the corner. If you've got a bunch of apps that have failed to install or have stalled for some reason, you can hit that cog and go retry failed app installations or retry installations that are stuck on installing. So instead of going through and clicking reinstall 50, 60 times, you can actually hit that once and then go retry failed app installations. I found that very useful when you deploy, say, another 100 iPads and you forget to do that VPP extra license load to account for the new devices, and then they all turn on and 60 apps fail on 60 devices. So you go buy the licenses, but then you would have to click hundreds of times to try and push those out again. So that little cog saves a lot of time when you've been short on licenses. It gives you the same kind of information as the devices menu, just what iPads listed, the owner, groups they're a part of, when they've checked in. So you'll see the same sort of data repeated again, but it's always handy to kind of have it at your fingertips when you're doing something like that deployment. The meat and potatoes of Jamf, however, is the profiles. So over here, you can see profiles is where you can effectively dictate how you want these iPads to kind of deploy and what control you have over them. It kind of goes over, well, the general choices are you've got the wallpaper and how you'd like the layout to display. You've got web clips or bookmarks to websites that display as little apps on the home screen, and then the student restrictions. They're kind of the big ones that you'll go through. So we'll start with wallpaper. So if you want to make a new profile, you've got the create profile button up here. And then you would choose iOS with device enrollment, because you're not using users, you own these devices. You can give it a name and a description. And then you can put a time filter if you want, but if these are school-owned iPads, it's not something that you would really use. If you have a bring your own device system, you may have a time filter on student restrictions from, say, 8:30 till 3:30, and then outside of that time period, the restrictions wouldn't apply. So that would be the case you would use a time filter. But we have a wallpaper set up, so we will check out this profile. So profile name, wallpaper, description, sets the wallpaper, and footnote message. So just like the apps, they have a scope. So you can see they're added to all student and teacher iPads, and it will list those devices that are in the scope. So you've got a lot of different settings and payloads that you can do with profiles. So Wi-Fi profile, web clip, certificates, restrictions, lock screen, and wallpaper and layout tend to be the ones that everyone uses. So first up, we'll do wallpaper, which is literally as simple as upload a picture, choose which picture you would like, and then if you'd like to add some text to the background, you can see that text displayed. Quite often I use percentage name percentage, which will actually give the name of the device on the screen itself. So if you're trying to find something, you don't have to check the serial number or the information on the back of the iPad. You can have a much more readily identifiable piece of information. And you can also add the serial number onto the wallpaper by literally another variable like that. You've got quite a lot of power of what gets displayed there. And on the lock screen message, you've effectively got the same set of variables and information. So you may have property owned by X school, please return or call this number if missing or found, which is a great thing if you've got, say, bring your own devices and the student's got a pin on it, which means no one could find out who it belongs to, but you can have a footnote so that it can always be turned in if found. So the next profile we will look at is web clips, which is really useful for testing environments or logging into the SIG portal. So each web clip will have the title that will be displayed as kind of an app button, where it will actually navigate to. If you'd like a specific browser to be used, not specified, it'll use Safari. Icon to display. If you want to have the little rounding effect on the icon, obviously if you want to remove this web clip or not, most of us don't. And then if you want to display the web clip as a full screen application. So if you don't have that ticked, it'll look like it opens Safari and then display the web page as Safari. If you have that ticked, it'll look like it's launching an application, but it'll really be Safari without any of the extra GUI elements. And again, pat testing, typing.com. It's a good way to have websites that are effectively teaching resources as a displayable application. The big profile, as we're cutting it for time, is student restrictions, which we scope to everybody. So this one is big. It has a lot of options and a lot of power to either allow students or stop students from doing things. It can go away from use of the camera, if you can do screenshots, be observed by the classroom app, allow removing apps in general, restrictions, airdrop, spell check, which is always nice to turn off. If they want what applications are available or what can be used, turning off the game center and bookstore, music, news, it's all fairly standard. Autofill is sometimes a nice one to turn off if they're shared iPads for like student passwords or if they kind of share resources. Deferring software updates for 90 days means you'll usually bypass all the buggy releases of Apple software, which is occasionally a problem. Obviously turning off all of the iCloud information unless it's a one-to-one scenario and you're letting the students use it. Security and privacy, password autofills, if you're doing backups or documents. AirPrint is a useful one. You can disallow that if you want. Options for Classroom, which will be going into next week. And then if you want the users to change anything, or if you want to completely lock them out. So turning off the wallpaper and notifications is always good. If you've got like cellular plans or if it's a BYOD setup and they do have cellular plans, do take note of if they get turned on or off. Installing configuration profiles, useful to do for a recovery situation, because if that's unticked, then you have no way to add Jamf back on without wiping the device again. So it's really to go through and see what you do and don't want the users to be able to do. You will occasionally find problems with media content. If you set the apps at a primary school level, things like Chrome won't actually install because they have access to adult content, but it's blocked by the SIG, but the app is still capable of it. So if you have that set to 12 plus, a lot of browsers won't deploy at all, purely because they're capable of it. So their rating is actually higher, which can be annoying. So that's mostly the common profile payloads that you'll see. I don't think there's anything else that this school, for example, uses. Oh, except wireless. So wireless should be deployed by whoever sets up Jamf, and then in theory shouldn't be touched after that. but the Wi-Fi will just be set up for wireless 5, join the network. You'll have the certificates uploaded and make sure you have them ticked. And then you can see the settings that pretty much every school will be using for TLS and proxies. So it may be different for some schools, but the Wi-Fi is at least something that you kind of fire and forget. I believe that's pretty much everything that was on the presentation list, but I see we've got 4 minutes. Is there any questions, or did I cover anything too fast? Anything that anyone would like to bring up?
Where do you get the certificates from for the Wi-Fi?
So I believe you can pull them off of a device that's already obtained them. I know I used them on my MacBook and I downloaded them from the department servers, but quite often there'll be AIT that actually has them in a folder somewhere and has shared them around or can install them. But if Jamf has been set up, then they should at least already be added to a profile and be available. But we have them freely available too if you need some assistance to get those certificates added.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of for setting up the Wi-Fi to automatically log in as a user rather than have the student do it. Is that problematic? Because a lot of them turn around and use a generic user and a generic password, and then they find that there's lots of problems.
So there's two. So in Department of Education schools, there's 2 ways you can go about it. One is that you have a kindergarten account that gets deployed to all of the iPads. Principals can choose to do this, but it does bypass being able to trace specific students on the firewall. But it does mean that all iPads will be kind of all logged in at once and functional. The other way, if you need more accountability, is you have a service account that's pushed out to the Wi-Fi, and the service account should allow access to Jamf, Apple, and kind of all the required servers in the background. And then, in fact, the web clip that I showed you before, when the user picks up an iPad, they'll open up this authenticate web clip, which will actually open up the firewall. And then you have to have a user log into the SIG effectively. There's no way to make sure the right user signs in, but it does mean that the iPad can update in the background. And then if it gets picked up, someone has to be there using it and use their login. I know some primary schools use a Surface account for, say, kindergarten and maybe years 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, they use their own accounts with the Surface account. So you can also split it between what groups have anonymous sign-in that is more easy to access the internet, or accountable internet, which you actually have to know your account to be able to log in.
Yeah, and being a high school, you have to have accountable every time.
Yeah, so you would definitely have the service account deployed in your instance.
Yep. That was the question I needed.
Awesome. That's all good. And we can also, at any time, drop into your Jamf and help you with any configurations that are being a bugbear.
Yeah, that's good. It's good to know.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I'm slowly getting my head around it.
Yeah, so it's a fairly simple process once you've been playing with it, because it really is kind of the trifecta of their devices. The devices belong somewhere in a group, and then depending on what groups, you're allowed to do these things.
Yep.
I find the smart groups help quite considerably, because if you have the smart groups look at the device name, if it has student in the device name, it gets all the student restrictions. And then if it has junior or senior or ECE, it'll pick up extra layouts. It will pick out the apps or different wallpapers if they're on different blocks is a good way to identify iPads.
Yeah, That sounds good.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm still working my way through. We've got a few. We've got more, so I'm just got 20 already deployed into 3 groups, and that looks good. It was just the Wi-Fi side of it that was getting me stuck.
Okay. So have you done a service account and then kind of having issues with that, or?
It's basically trying to make sure that that I tried the service account and that didn't work, but it's just the kids when they log in as them into SIG, it will remember them for 2 hours, which is 2 classes. So then you get little Johnny come along and Fred's already logged in. He can do what he likes and Fred will get the blame of it.
Yeah, so that is a behavioral issue. But with this web clip, if you visit that web clip once you're already logged in, it will give you the ability to log out as well.
Yep.
So if you can teach students to use that web clip at the end of a session, then the next person to use it can't have them remembered.
Yep.
So that would probably work quite well for you. And I can contact you offline and get that sorted out as well.
Yeah, that would be good.
Not a problem. Is there anyone else who has anything, or if I've sped past something? Cool. It must be a Friday.
Yeah.
That's all
Finished
good.
the popcorn and I finished my drinks.
Time to go home. All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I think I have another one of these next week. So I will find out what we're covering and we will join again.
Yep. Excellent.
Thanks, James.
Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.